I just first wanted to thank everybody who came here today, members of my family, my mom via FaceTime, hi Mom, friends, classmates, colleagues, members, and clergy from CBST, Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, where I'm the rabbinical intern. I also wanted to thank my mentor, even though she couldn't be here today, Dr. Joy Layden, who helped me write this sermon, and something that I'm holding with me right now, and she said before I went up today, is that courage, truth, and love will always bring out the best in us. When I was a child, my mother insisted on packing my school lunch, regardless of how late she had to stay at the hospital or whether she was on call that night. My lunchbox would always be ready to go in the morning. My mother wanted to make sure I ate a well-balanced meal, and she always included a note written on a paper napkin. Sometimes it would give me encouragement for the day. Sometimes it would remind me of an after-school activity, but she would always end the note with "I love you," which, as you can imagine, contributed to my endless embarrassment as a teenager. Yet those 3 words told a profound story, one that rewrote the role of motherhood, of a woman balancing the commitments of work and home, motivated by the courage to love. Words, even simple words, have power, for they tell stories about who we are, what we are, and the world around us. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. With a few words, the universe is illuminated for the very first time, and from this initial spark, the necessary elements for life emerge. The biblical account of creation begins with the recognition that language is invested with generative power and creative potential. From words, the world comes into being. We are the inheritors of this ability. With words, we weave stories that invest our lives with meaning, define our relationships, shape society, and form the building blocks of civilization. Like God, we can fashion entire worlds of our imagination, shaping them with our words. The first act of humankind, of Adam HaRishon, was to name every living creature. With words, Adam ordered and organized life into discrete categories: plant and animal, vertebrate and invertebrate, fish, fowl, and beast. From this taxonomy, new stories were told of natural selection, the origin of species, and the dominion of humankind. Stories help us understand what is and what could be. Perhaps this is the staying power of Genesis, for embedded within its mythic arc is a startling proposition that all people are created b'tselem Elohim, in the divine image, that each of us is a reflection of the transcendent, a being of infinite value and inalienable worth. This is a bold assertion, for we live in a world that obscures this truth. We live in a world that says some lives are worth more than others, that we must prioritize the privilege of a few over the dignity of the many. We live in a world that often prevents us from seeing our own value, that tells us stories of our inadequacy and need. Last week, Christine Blasey Ford testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee as its members debated the future composition of our nation's highest court. She was there to tell a story, one that conveyed difficult truths about those we choose to put in positions of power. Dr. Ford demonstrated the strength of character required to offer a counter-narrative, particularly in a society where a woman's memory, integrity, and fitness for leadership are regarded with suspicion. But perhaps even more than the truth she told us about our judiciary, Dr. Ford's testimony has shed light on how our country talks about sexual violence and the stories we continue to tell about gender, privilege, and power. For we live in a world that continues to be shaped by the words of men. We excuse the debasement of women as locker room talk, when this accommodation betrays the persistence of misogyny. The story that boys will be boys allows for the expression of power and desire by means of violence, and the expectation that this kind of behavior is acceptable, or at the very least, can occur without consequence. The narrative of female hysteria primes us to discount women's voices. Their testimony is consistently placed under greater scrutiny than that of their male peers. And the othering of trans and genderqueer individuals ensures that their stories remain unheard. It is no wonder that most occurrences of sexual violence go unreported. This is a world constrained by a limited vocabulary, whose harmful effects have left their mark on each of our lives, no matter our gender or sexuality, whether we are a perpetrator, a bystander, or a survivor. I want to tell you two stories. The first is from my freshman year of college, when two men fed me alcohol, isolated me, and assaulted me. The memory of trauma is fickle. It's a tangle of haunting images and missing information. I no longer remember many details from that night, and I count that as a blessing. But there are some things that I can't forget, things that are, in the words of Dr. Ford, indelible in the hippocampus, the cruel tenor of their voices, the stench of cologne, and a small, dark room. Yet perhaps more important than the moment itself is the second story. Part of it was told by the narrative of masculinity that I inherited as a boy, that men are strong, capable, and always in control, that we always want sex, that we are never the victim. The other part of this story was shaped by what it means to be a survivor of sexual violence in this country, that we can't be believed because the memory of trauma is fragmentary, that we must have facilitated the event by what we wore, where we were, whom we spoke to, and how we acted, that our stories are fabricated to malign innocent men. What we call people, how we speak to them, and how we talk about them creates the world that they must adapt to, and often determines whether they will survive it. The ability of our words to give life or destroy it is an old story. Proverbs reminds us, life and death come by the tongue. It is unclear whether Dr. Ford will survive the world that is taking shape around her. Like many survivors of sexual violence, her testimony has been embedded within a narrative of distrust, largely by powerful men who fear what might happen if we speak truthfully about the persistence of gender inequality in this country. Despite the protest of a few almost exclusively female members of Congress, Dr. Ford has been the subject of a criminal interrogation. Questions regarding her integrity, the authenticity of her pain, and the reliability of her memory betray the fact that it is her character on trial. Oppressive language, writes Toni Morrison, does more than represent violence. It is violence. The words deployed against Dr. Ford are clearly intended to shame and silence her. And this is the case for countless survivors of sexual violence. Having already experienced an unacceptable act of cruelty, those who come forward to tell their truth risk their career, their community, and their character. But it is within our power to change this story. The rabbis teach us that everything that came into being during the 6 days of creation needed fixing. This is why the biblical account ends with the phrase, Asher bara Elohim la'asot, everything that the divine had made to do. The word la'asot, to do, is in the infinitive, hinting at the necessity of further action. God gave humankind the building blocks for a perfect world. It is up to us to complete it. And just as the divine spoke this world into being, so too can we utilize the power of language to fix it, telling stories that redefine our relationships and reshape society. Following my assault, I told myself a story of shame, guilt, and weakness. But slowly the people around me helped change this narrative. My mother reminding me I love you, that I am the beneficiary of an innate and immutable dignity. My friends saying I believe you, that the burden of wrongdoing is not mine to bear. And my partner telling me I respect you, that my body, my heart, and my mind are God-given and deserve to be treated as such. These words, simple and powerful, allowed a new world to emerge, a world built from love. Love recognizes no barriers, Maya Angelou teaches. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, and penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope. Love has the ability to cut through the tangled mess of stories about our inadequacy and our need. This is the power of Me Too, a confluence of individuals using the scars of their past to recognize the wounds in other people, holding their pain with the kind of compassion that can only come from seeing our essential selves, the God-given image of infinite value and inalienable worth. For we cannot love without understanding the fundamental truth of Genesis, that every human has been endowed by our Creator with inherent dignity, the inalienable right to a life free from harm, and an essential role in this world's perfection. This is why Angela Davis describes love as the most radical act, for it grasps at the root of things. Love tells the fundamental story of humankind, of a world in its infancy, and a God who had the audacity and hope to form us in the divine image. But how do we build a world from love? We begin with ourselves, recognizing the power of our words. If life and death come by the tongue, it is incumbent upon us to choose life. We must speak from a place that acknowledges and affirms the dignity of all people, guided by what Bell Hooks calls a love ethic, a relational lens that asks us to seek out and protect the humanity of those forced to the margins of society. We must practice the phrases that can help reshape this world for the better. I hear you. I see you. I love you. We must look to others, in particular those in power, holding them accountable for the words that they use. We must make it clear that our political and religious discourse will no longer accommodate language that perpetrates bigotry and violence. While we cannot afford to deny the humanity of those who cause harm, we must be unequivocal in our condemnation of their actions. And we must listen to the testimony of Dr. Ford, to the stories of Me Too, to the call of the Women's March. Judaism is clear in its command to listen to the cries of the oppressed. Let us protect our storytellers. Let us create space for truth to emerge. Those of us who can must tell our stories, to write and say the words that let others know that they are not alone, for even this room has its survivors. May they be our teachers. May they be our clergy. May they be our leaders that we can learn from as we learn the language for fixing the world. None of us can rewrite history, but each of us can contribute to the creation of a different narrative. So let's start simply. Think of someone that you love. Make a commitment that before the end of this day, you will tell them, I love you. Let those words be the beginning of a story about their worth, their particular reflection of the divine image. For from 3 words, a new world can come into being. If you will all stand with me. Yitgadal v'yikdash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach chirtei v'amlich malchutei b'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayed zechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yiraman v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah brichu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'yimru Amen. All Yisrael vel Rabbanan vel Talmidei Hon vel Kol Talmidei Hon vel Kol Man Daskin Be'oraita Di Ve'atra Hedin V'Di Bechol Atar Ve'atar Yehei Lachon Ulachon Shlama Rabba China V'Chista V'Rachamin V'Chayin Arichin U'Mezunah Revicha Ufor kana min kadam avuhon di vishmaya v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleni v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Osei shalom b'mramav hu barachamav yasei shalom aleni v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen.